Hey guys, so I watched like almost 200 movies in 2018, and that's like a lot. And I thought it'd be really cool if I acknowledge some of the films that I watched and talk about what I really liked about them. Before I start, I do want to say that I am not a film hoe, so if you're expecting a hardcore critique, this is not the video you want to be watching. I am simply like a stanny who likes watching films and notices things in like an amateur film hoe sort of way. The first set of movies I won't be talking deeply about because the movie overall just wasn't enough for me to talk about in depth, or because I just think it's lacking in a lot of areas, but it's like still a good movie and worth watching, if you know what I mean. It's a solid movie, but it's like not enough for me to consider it a cinematic masterpiece. Like, it's for funsies. While I do find sports movies annoyingly repetitive, Bend It Like Beckham is racially inclusive and tackles traditionalism in Indian culture, specifically gender roles. I'm not gonna lie, there are a lot of questionable things being said or done in this movie, hence why many Asians, including myself, called out this movie on its bad representation, as well as its insensitive comments. Despite this, I think Crazy Rich Asians is a fun little romantic comedy with Asian actors and Asian culture, but please remember that this is not necessarily a good Asian representation. Love, Simon normalizes being queer and allows the masses to relate and identify with Simon's struggles and environment, as opposed to like obnoxiously romanticized and sexualized queer stories made by heteros. But you know what? I'm not gonna get into that. Love, Simon is a cute romantic comedy that also sets a healthy, good example on one of the ways a family could react to their child coming out. To All the Boys I Loved Before is another cute romantic comedy with an Asian main character. Again, it has a generic filming style, but it's really good, and it has the fake relationship trope, which is like iconic. Is it weird that most of my list so far is romantic comedies? Like, honestly, who am I? Anyway, Set It Up's plot is literally straight out of a 2011 fanfic, but it actually works, so you know what? Deal with it. The book had me sobbing, and the movie had me sobbing. The Hate U Give focuses on police brutality against Black Americans. It has been happening for decades, and it is still happening now. Please watch this movie. It is raising awareness for such an important issue. It took me forever to watch this movie. If you want a really stressful, heart-throbbing tragedy with really pleasing animation, Your Name is for you. If you watch this, have fun dying. I'm not really sure how to describe this movie. Maybe a thriller? If you're worried about how obsessions with social media can motivate people to do really bad things, I'd call this a horror movie. Alright, so the following movies I think highly of because they either had a really good story, cinematography, or had other bits and pieces that I really liked. But they're still like missing something, and they're not considered one of my top movies of 2018. This film is rated R. Let's start with this comedic sci-fi movie that stars the legend Anne Hathaway. After being kicked out of her apartment by her partner, Gloria leaves New York and moves back to her hometown. Upon arrival, Gloria sees news reports of a giant creature destroying Seoul, and comes to the realization that she is somehow connected to this creature. I sort of watched this movie just so I could watch something, but I ended up genuinely enjoying this movie. Colossal is a unique story told with an interesting set of characters and perspective. It really surprised me with its dramatic change of tone and the way they executed the climax of the story. This movie is not rated. Trigger warning for violence and little gore. This movie threw me off. Based on the trailer, you'd expect one of those generic first-person POV action movies, but it's actually a lot more than that. The Villainess follows an assassin who was recruited by an agency and was promised a life of freedom after serving them for 10 years. And shit happens, and our badass main character goes on a violent rampage for revenge. As I was watching this, I thought this was going to be a dark, revenge-driven thriller. But I can't spoil it, but it eruptively transitions into a completely different genre, and honestly, it should not work, but it did for me because I am weak and I loved it. The Villainess has really good use of lighting, especially the blue-green hues. The most intriguing part for me are the fight scenes because they are filmed in long traveling shots. Big kudos to the fighting choreographer. I love you. This movie is rated R. Trigger warning for a lot of blood and gore. If you know me, you know I love serial killer stories. However, I hate slasher films, and yet Tragedy Girls has surprisingly wormed its way into my heart. Tragedy Girls is about two crime and death obsessed teenagers who come to the realization that the best way to leave a legacy and achieve fame is to murder people and talk about it on their social media account.
You're just hitting a bone, dude. I'm trying.
It is an interesting mix of slasher and comedy, and I did not think I would like it as much as I did. As briefly mentioned earlier, there is a lot of blood and gore in this film. And by gore, I mean like body parts gore. And there are some scenes in the movies where I even had to look away, so be very cautious if this is unsettling for you.
Nothing.
Is that blood?
Heavy flow day.
I don't know if that's not how that works, right?
This film is not rated. Trigger warning for blood and gore. First of all, the Babysitter is cheesy as shit. But it seems intentional, like ironic and satirical? I don't know, but basically it actually works with the style of the movie. So the story goes like this. The kid stays up past his bedtime to spy on his babysitter and finds out that they're in a satanic cult and has to fight to stay alive. This movie has some really nice shots with shadows and minimal lighting, and I am like a sucker for that. The Babysitter also plays with that annoying nostalgia cliche, which is probably why I liked it so much. Most of this story is exaggerated. Like, honestly, what middle schooler knows how to do any of this stuff? I don't know, but it worked in Home Alone and it works in here. This film is rated R. Trigger warning for rape and slut-shaming. Teeth is about a girl who has a toothed vagina. And what do these teeth do? If you haven't figured it out already, you'll find out when you watch. First thing you need to know is that a lot of this is satirical. And you need to know this because the beginning half is obnoxiously slut-shaming people to the point where I was even pissed off. But it's to acknowledge the hypocrisy of a conservative mindset. Its satirical focus and story is literally what makes this a good movie. This film is rated R. Trigger warning for blood, gore, and nudity. Seduced and pressured to adapt to a different culture at their college, the main character develops a craving for raw meat. Yep, raw meat. If cannibalism is too unsettling for you, I would not recommend this movie. Raw brilliantly uses its score to get under your skin and make you uncomfortable, yet completely mesmerized by the film. The colors, the cinematography, the pace of the story, all of it is really captivating and keeps me on the edge of my seat, like 500% of the time. This movie is straight up weird and shows cannibalism in a disturbing yet exciting way, similar to how cannibalism was portrayed in NBC's Hannibal. Right, so sorry for all these gross, gory movies. Let's just move on to some cool animations. This film is rated PG. Song of the Sea is a retelling of an Irish myth. It follows two siblings who find out that the youngest, Saoirse, is a Selkie, a mythical being that appears human on land and seal in water, and must find a way to break a spell to free fairy creatures and save Saoirse's life. If you couldn't tell from the clips playing right now, this hand-drawn movie is literally gorgeous, and its pure heart-wrenching story about family will make you emotional and maybe even cry, like me. This film is rated R. Trigger warning for graphic violence and body horror. 31 years ago, the Japanese government dropped an atomic bomb on Tokyo after a secret military project went wrong. Now in a dystopian 2019 Tokyo, a biker gang leader tries to save his friend from the consequences of said military experiment, which has given him telekinetic abilities. Akira is a cult classic, and one of those trippy movies that leave you speechless and forced to ponder what the hell happened for 500 hours. I wasn't that impressed with the story, sorry, but the style of animation, the color choices, the music, and just the peculiarity of some of the scenes, especially the hallucinations, made me admire this film. And I mainly just watched this because Gerard Way loves this movie, and I love Gerard Way. This film is rated PG-13. In this mystery drama film, a postman's son goes out in the world to deliver Vincent van Gogh's final letter to his brother Theo, and along the way investigates Vincent's final days through people who personally knew him. And yes, I do say Van Gogh because I'm American and we don't pronounce it properly. Out of all the Vincent films out there, this one feels the most real because it doesn't completely exaggerate events or romanticize his death and depression. Approaching the suicide controversy with a series of different perspectives from people who were part of Vincent's life really sold the movie for me. I found it interesting to see everyone's thoughts and experiences with Vincent. Visually, this film is amazing. Each frame was painted on canvases by over 100 artists imitating Van Gogh's art style. And I love that they incorporated various Van Gogh paintings throughout the story. As a Van Gogh stanny, I want to point out that the title, Loving Vincent, actually comes from his letters to Theo, which he would sometimes sign as, Your Loving Vincent. So now back to my horror movies. The following movies are categorized as my highest rated movies of 2018. This film is rated R, trigger warning for implied rape and nudity. Jay, the main character, is followed by a fatal supernatural curse after her first sexual encounter. Yes, this is basically a movie about a supernatural STD. It Follows could be interpreted as a generic horror movie, but there's a lot more to it. Many scenes in this film can be interpreted as references and symbolism to the loss of innocence after sexual assault and to rape culture. The constant fear of a supernatural being following her is similar to a victim in their daily life, afraid of something that could force them to relive their assault and the possibility of seeing the rapist's face again. And the way her friends belittle and brush aside her paranoia and don't believe her parallels to how rape culture comes into effect in the real world. The story was compelling, the score made me stay on edge, and overall this movie just scared the hell out of me. This film is rated R, trigger warning for drug use and graphic sexual content. A series of deaths occur in a small town after the arrival of a mysterious goody-two-shoes Captain America-looking-ass soldier who claims to be a friend of their dead brother. This movie is disguised as a generic, forgettable action movie in the trailer, and while it is an action movie, the last quarter of the movie is so iconic and so well done, I would not say it's forgettable. I'm not playing any clips to prove it, but the last quarter of the movie is so visually pleasing to me.
For the damages.
This film is rated PG-13. After David's 16-year-old daughter goes missing, he hacks into her laptop, hoping to find clues hidden in his daughter's digital footprints. The entirety of this film takes place on a laptop screen. And although that should be limiting, the film looked me in the face and said, LOL, you thought, screw you, and excelled beyond my expectations. This amazing mystery thriller had me stressed AF the whole time. It shows how we would look for information in our world today. It also shows, how much information you can find about a person online. And this movie kind of got me scared of, the possibility of me disappearing, because despite constantly using social media, I'm also secretive in real life and online, so, I would be screwed, kind of. I will admit, the ending was a little borderline unbelievable. For a movie that excels at pacing and slowly building tension, the climax was a little rushed and overwhelming. Also, just want to say this, John Cho, I love you and I miss you, and you are so underrated and you deserve so much more roles than Hollywood is giving you. Trigger warning for rape, child abuse, drug use, gore towards the end of the movie, and Game of Thrones kind of nudity and sex scenes. Set in 1930s Korea, a young pickpocket is recruited to aid in an elaborate conning, an attempt to rob a Japanese heiress, under the disguise of her handmaiden. The handmaiden shows the same events through different character perspectives. The seductive, deceitful atmosphere and badass women protagonists literally had me so engrossed in the story. The cinematography, especially the wide shots, the costumes and set designs, are literally to die for. This is a beautifully filmed, queer, psychological thriller. Mayhaps I am in love. This film is not rated. Trigger warning for graphic rape scenes and violent content. After accidentally killing her rapist, an art student is fueled with inspiration to become a vigilante, to avenge other college students whose rapist suffered zero consequences for their actions. I love this unapologetic feminist take on sexual assault on college campuses. The way this movie shows how some rape victims suffer reliving their experiences, and the way this movie expresses how rape culture is present in therapists and rape prevention advocates, and how rapists don't get punished in our world today was just so accurate and so good. It's been a while since I've seen this film, but I do recall enjoying the way it was filmed, the colors in the movie, and the way they portray the stress of being an art student TM, as well as seeing her make art whenever she was filled with inspiration. This film is rated PG. Trigger warning for rapidly flashing lights. After being bitten by a radioactive spider, Miles Morales gains spider-like abilities. Shocking. With the help of other Spider-Men from other universes, Miles must fight to save his city and stop alternate dimensions from collapsing. While there are 500 movies about a retired legend becoming a mentor for the new generation, this movie stands out for so many reasons. And yes, this plot is predictable, but you know what? Shut up. First of all, we love an interracial Spider-Man. Second, what a great soundtrack, minus that song with that homophobic rapper that died. He has no business being in this fucking movie. The style of the movie, the way it incorporated typical comic book text bubbles, was just amazing and so effective in expressing emotions and creating an overall tone. And have I mentioned that they actually released a Spidey Christmas album with the cast? It's a crack album. A crack fic, but an album. Yeah, okay, I'll stop. Speaking of the cast, shout out to the casting director for actually casting POC to represent the characters, like Shamik Moore from The Get Down, rest in peace, and Kimiko Glenn from Waitress the Musical for Penny Parker. Because I am so tired of having animated POC characters played by white people. This review is really messy, I am so sorry. But to close, the animation is breathtaking and so original, and this is a solid coming-of-age superhero movie. The last two movies are my top-rated movies of 2018, and the only ones I rated 9 out of 10. This film is rated R. Trigger warning for drug use, sexual content, and body gore. Kinda. In an alternate modern-day universe, Cassius, who has been struggling getting money, lands a job as a telemarketer and discovers that using a white voice will help him reach success and money. Meanwhile, his coworkers and friends plot to protest against corporate oppression. I watched this expecting a film addressing white privilege and oppression in the workforce, but oh my god, it is so much more than that. Sorry to Bother You perfectly executes a satirical tone that addresses greed and capitalism and racism and people profiting off the labor of lower and middle classes in the weirdest, most interesting way.
Let me give you a tip. You want to make some money here? Use your white voice.
My white voice?
I'm not talking about Will Smith's wife, like this young blood.
Hey, Mr. Kramer, this is Langston from Regal View.
I love the pacing of this movie. Like, the intensity gradually increases until you reach the amazing, well-written and executed climax of the movie. Although it turns a little more sci-fi towards the movie, the parallels to our society is still there. Just really, really exaggerated in the movie. And the editing of this movie is just, like, superb. Everything about it. Its style is just so different and eye-catching, and it works so well with the tone of the movie. Honestly, I would recommend not watching the trailer or listening to me talk about this movie, because I just think it's best to just watch this movie without any prior knowledge. This film is rated R. Trigger warning for sexual assault.
Hey guys, it's Kayla back with another video.
Yes, Bo Burnham made a movie, and it's great. First of all, the soundtrack is great. I saved that shit so quickly. On the surface, this movie looks like a fun little comedy highlighting the awkwardness of our early teenage years. But like everything Bo Burnham, underneath that comedy is a bunch of raw emotional shit. There are so many scenes where I literally felt like I was a middle schooler again, and I felt so empathetic for Kayla. Bo Burnham perfectly recreates situations the audience can relate to, and feel Kayla's fear of rejection from her peers, and how a negative response from them has the power to push her deeper into a hole of insecurity. Looking back, I know that my problems were so small and trivial, but seeing Kayla reminds me of how real my fears were, and all that self-hatred and doubt and loneliness and struggle to just be good enough that developed because of it. And I want so badly for kids nowadays to watch and just know that they're not alone. In addition to basically making me relive my middle school trauma, this movie also gave me a lot of comfort. Seeing both sides was really interesting. Like seeing Kayla struggle in this stage of her life, and then seeing the parent who knows that growing up is hard, but can't really connect to their child and assure them that it's going to be okay. This movie includes a series of YouTube self-help videos that Kayla filmed for her YouTube channel, and it like parallels who she pretends and wants to be online versus who she is in real life. Editing them as voiceovers for the scenes where she struggles with those issues she's talking about is just so fucking brilliant! This movie also addresses the sexual pressures and expectations young teens deal with. And Bo Burnham, I love you so much for bringing this up. Rape culture is a problem, and we need to address it because so many of us experience these traumatizing situations at such a young age, like Kayla, and I hate how common it is. The example provided in the movie is not what society typically views as attempted rape. And the way the predator acts about it, and the way that they try to guilt Kayla afterwards, it's just, I hate it. I hate it so much because it's so real. Basically, I love this movie. It is a great movie to watch alone and cry. It is a great movie to watch with a younger sibling. It is a great movie for kids. Anyway, that's the end of this video, so bye. I'm so sorry that this was so long. Enjoy.